My next guest is Justin Freeman. Justin is with Coffman. You're an engineering firm, right?
We are, yes.
Tell me a little bit about why you got into the whole business of consulting engineering, and particularly into the hydrogen economy.
Yeah, no problem. This is really kind of my second time around with Coffman.
Okay.
So I started with them out of university, but
where'd you go to school?
University of Colorado, Boulder.
Okay. All right.
And I started to work for Chevron pretty shortly up in Alaska, and I've basically been in energy my whole life, in energy, building capital projects, and but you know, the world needs to transition to a lower carbon future, and so I had an opportunity to lead their CCUS program management.
Okay.
And this was kind of the second bite at the apple for them, and there's a lot of people that didn't believe that this was anything that was going to happen. This was before the IRA bill,
right.
before all the hubs, and so I developed their carbon capture program. A lot of times that's looking at hubs, it's looking at how you can use hydrogen to decarbonize, because carbon capture isn't always the best way.
Right.
Same thing with electrification, so it's trying not to force fit the wrong technology on the wrong process. And then remote work and everything, I wanted to get back to Alaska, raise our family there, and so I had an opportunity to come back to Coffman and lead their CCUS and hydrogen business as a new market for them.
Is Coffman based in Alaska?
We've got one of our oldest offices in Alaska, but we've got 20 offices all across the United States.
Okay.
So we're in Guam, Hawaii, the Carolinas, Houston, Dallas, Denver. We primarily, our history has been in the Northwest, so we have 6 offices in California. But very multidisciplinary engineering services.
As I mentioned to you before we even got to interview, that I wrote an article for this publication, right, on green energy technology, and the article was hydrogen, hype or hope. Is it hope?
Well, I mean, I remember George Bush talking about the hydrogen economy.
He did, didn't he? I know.
Yeah.
That was the first time I heard about it. And that's what I referenced in the thing. I said, in 2000 and whatever, George Bush said, and we're still not there. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's interesting, because there was a lot of momentum, right? And so that's where some of the people that were trying to advise me on my career when I was going into CCUS, they said, we looked at that, we tried it, we're not going to do it, right?
Okay. Right.
And so it was kind of the same with hydrogen, but this feels different, I think that everybody was realizing, we've lost time, we are not on the right trajectory. And we're not going towards a 1.5 degree world. We're not going towards a 2 degree world right now.
Yeah.
And we need hydrogen in various forms of production pathways as toolkits in the decarbonization to decarbonize the economy. And the one thing that I tell people is, I've been around the world. I mean, I've been to Africa, I've been to Eurasia. There's a lot of people that live in energy poverty today.
Yeah.
And they can't enjoy our quality of life in the same way in which we got there with, coal and natural gas and all these things. Like, we've got to look at how to decarbonize the world, not just the U.S.
Right.
And I think that, countries are blessed with different natural resources. So the answer isn't going to be the same in every location. But, take the Gulf Coast, for instance. You have very cheap natural gas, and you have amazing geological storage.
Right.
So blue hydrogen is going to thrive in that environment.
Right.
The Pacific Northwest is a totally different story. You don't have the geological storage. You do have access to natural gas, but, they have renewable energy and hydro and land, and, so even the renewable landscape is different across the United States, whether it's wind resource or solar resource or hydro resource. So I think there's kind of an all of the above, and we should be agnostic about what that technology pathway is it the right application for that market? What's the carbon intensity of it? And getting the public acceptance and leveraging those synergies between industries and market sectors.
You mentioned public acceptance. Because of the war in Ukraine, Europe has suddenly said, "Oh, we've got energy insecurity."
Right.
That's not been a problem before, and it's not going to be solved with renewables in Germany, for instance. So they've got a much more, the motivation factor there is stronger because of energy and security. When you look at the U.S., as you said, we are an energy-rich country, no matter where you go, from Maine to Southern Cal. Our motivation for doing it is to decarbonize, to make the world a better place. So as you said, there's different motivations for doing it. You've been around the world. How much is the motivation from Europe's perspective, where we've got to fast forward? We can't wait 20 years to get there. What do you think the issues there are about speeding this thing up? More so than maybe in the United States? And is it helping? Projects that work there can work here, because now we have an incubator. Hey, They did this, they did that. Talk a little bit about the different motivations for getting there.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like Europe and America flipped a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about hydrogen back in the Bush administration, and it was about energy security.
Right.
And we've gone to importing a lot of our energy, to now we're exporting crude oil, we're exporting LNG. A lot of that, I led developments in West Texas on unconventional and fracking, and that unlocked a huge resource. Whereas Europe was more focused on carbon intensity and decarbonization. And now with the Ukraine war, energy security has taken on much more prominence for them than maybe historically it had. And so I think we have to figure out, how do we do both of those things? Have the national security, have energy security, while we're also decarbonizing. And I think that Europe has different resources, but that's where allies working together can supplement and offset each other, or work together to find those synergies to achieve both those things.
Great intro to my last point I want to talk about, allies working together, but I'm really going to ask about collaboration. It seems like, even at this, I've been at a number of hydrogen conferences, it seems like the hydrogen economy this time around is a much more collaborative economy. There's no one technology, one person. You mentioned toolkit. There are a lot of different things in that toolkit, and I think there's more of an openness to do that. Is that a correct statement? And how do you see that from Coffman's perspective?
Yeah, well, I think we have to scale, and we have to scale quickly. And so, standardization, fuel standards, figuring out infrastructure between market sectors that maybe don't normally collaborate with each other. But if you share infrastructure and you share, expense or capital development, or have different use cases for hydrogen, you can start to realize and make hydrogen work, and help drive down that cost as well. And so, we don't need to reinvent the hydrogen wheel in 15 different locations across the United States, right? So share what's working, figure out designs that can scale and be applied many times. And, I think that's a great opportunity, but you also have to have a commercial business lens. People need to make money in this, right? And so what's proprietary, what's unique to their project, what value do they bring to the business, and then figure out where you have those win-wins. And I'm a big believer in strategic partnership. So if you find those partners that you can work with across the value chain, and then collectively try to figure out how you drive cost out of the system, how you basically scale efficiently, that's all collaboration, as opposed to a very contractual process where maybe one company is winning and everybody else is losing.
Right.
I think this is very geared towards a market that there needs to be strategic collaboration across the value chain.
And just for your short time at this conference, do you see it happening?
Yeah, I do. I think a lot of people are trying to figure this out, right? How you put together renewable technology with solar, with electrolyzers. Solar only runs for part of the day, right? And so are you going to have electrolyzers that are sitting there underutilized for 60% of the time? So how do you find, applications, whether it's battery storage, grid power? How do you look at, CO2 hubs and hydrogen hubs from shared infrastructure? And it's very different, right? Like the natural gas market. Power companies, utility companies, they don't need to worry about what other companies are doing as long as they're getting the volumes in the natural gas. Right. contractually.
Right.
They don't need to understand what your infrastructure plans are or what you're doing, right? Just bring the gas to the meter and I'll basically burn that natural gas for my power generation, and that's the extent of the collaboration. It's very commercial. Where this is, you're talking about shared infrastructure and shared planning of that infrastructure with different business segments and different markets for hydrogen and carbon capture, and it's much more collaborative than anything I've seen with my typical oil and gas history.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Been a great interview.
Yeah.
Very insightful.